Okay, looks like I'm live here. We're going to see if anybody comes and joins us here. I have no idea what the heck happened there. Let's see if anybody can come join us. What a fun thing technology is. Really have no ability with technology. All right, let's see. It looks like a couple people, maybe a few people are coming to join. Welcome for those of you that are coming in. Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I don't understand technology at all. So we'll see if we can get this thing going and get all those people over there. I'm sure there was a way to just restart that stream from there. I'm sure there was a way to do that. I don't know what it is. Should I go over there? When do you guys want to go over to that other stream and just kind of message this one? I don't know. Maybe I should do that. Should I do that? You think? Let's try that. Let me see if I can do that here. Of course, I don't know how to do it, but let's see here. All right, let's go to YouTube and go to my thing. Oh, look, I've got two things playing live now. Let me try it here again. Let's see. I'm in a new place. All right. Let's see if that works. Okay. Well, we got a few people over here. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for sticking with me. You guys, let's see. Are you guys sending me any messages here? Let's see here. No messages. This should be so much easier for me. I need Michael, sure, to help me with the tech on this stuff. He's the tech guru when it comes to these kinds of things. So let's see. People are coming over. Okay. You guys trying to send texts or messages or anything? Can anybody let me know that you guys are here? How any of this works. Let's see. Nothing that I do with technology ever works, even a little bit. Okay, there's something on the side of this that should be giving me like messages, and I don't see any messages at all. It's got to be something I'm doing wrong. Let's see. All right, I'm going to try this way. Okay, I can see myself. Oh, here we go. All right. Okay, I can see myself. Oh, here we go. That's great. I can turn my own voice down. That would be good. All right, well, looks like, oh, you guys are here. Okay, I see now lots of messages. All right. I don't know why it wasn't showing me those messages before. I apologize. All right, where were we? What were we talking about? Oh, we were talking about the last guys on the ballot. Sorry about that. I really appreciate you guys coming over. So Michael Young got 9 votes, which I thought was a little bit much, but you know, like I say, he has a lot of respect in the game. A lot of people, hold him in a high regard. And he had a lot of hits, a lot of 200 hit seasons. So 9 votes for him, 5 votes for Lance Berkman. I thought Lance Berkman could have done better. To be honest with you, I was actually a little bit surprised that he didn't. I don't know. I think Lance Berkman is like a pretty legitimate Hall of Fame case. I don't know that I would vote for him necessarily. I mean, to me, he's borderline, but 5 votes for a guy who hit like that is kind of surprising. Miguel Tejada got the same 5 votes. Roy Oswalt with 4 votes. And, we'll talk a little bit more about this, I'm sure. But one of the things that the game at some point is going to realize is that pitchers who were great for a stretch of time, 6, 7, 8 years. Not good, but great for those years, like a Johan Santana, like a Brett Saberhagen, like a Roy Oswalt, like a Dave Stieb. Those guys should be considered. David Cohn. Those guys should be considered for the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying they should absolutely be Hall of Famers. I mean, I think we can argue about each one of them individually. But you know, Roy Oswalt was a really great pitcher. And again, I'm not saying he should be in the Hall of Fame, but you know, honestly, if it came down to it and I had to choose Roy Oswalt or Andy Pettitte, I'm taking Roy Oswalt to win a big game for me. I mean, Pettitte had his days as well. But anyway, Placido Polanco got 2 votes. Again, I think a lot of people loved Polanco. And then the guys with 0 votes, Juan Pierre, Freddie Garcia, Ted Lilly, Travis Hafner, Darren Oliver, Kevin Youkilis, Rick Ankiel, Vernon Wells, John Garland, Derek Lowe, and Jason Bay. So that's the full rundown of the ballot. And so now we can start talking about some sort of the specifics of these things, and I'll answer some of your questions here. So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the public and the private ballots, because I think that's a pretty substantial difference that you're going to see, and it's going to be very interesting. I think you'll see who was really hurt by the private ballots and who was really helped by the private ballots. So let's start with the 4 guys who got elected. Mariano obviously got all the ballots, both public and private, which was great. Roy Halladay, I was very, very surprised by this. Roy Halladay got 76.4% of the private ballot, which was he got basically 90%, a little more than 90% on the public ballots, 76.4 on the private ballots, minus 16 points. I mean, he barely was a Hall of Famer on the private ballots. And I don't know what this means. And maybe you guys will be able to kind of give me a sense of what you think it means. But you know, we'll see. As we're going to look at this, I don't know why. I don't know why so many private ballots did not have Roy Halladay on there compared to the public ballots. Edgar Martinez, we knew was going to get hurt somewhat by the private ballots. He actually didn't get hurt as badly as I thought. He actually got 80% of the private ballots, and which is great. It still wasn't as good. It was, you know, about 10 points less than he got on the publics, but good enough for him. And then there was the big question of Mussina. We all knew Mussina was going to get less on the private ballots. The question was he going to get so many less that he was going to fall off and not be elected? He made it. He made it pretty convincingly because he got 70.7% of the private ballots. That was an 11-point drop, but it was plenty good enough. And of course, he made it by 7 votes. But here's what I'm wondering. So does this mean that the private ballots do not think Mike Mussina is not a Hall of Famer? I mean, I don't understand it. I don't quite get it. And I think this is going to be my theory that I'm going to throw out to you. I think it's very specific to the internet. I think that the people who are private ballot people do not they're not internet animals. They're not on the internet. They're not following as closely on the internet the way these things go. For the most part, I'm giving a generalization, but I think in general they're sort of still kind of living in the time of a few years ago, and I think you'll see that based on some of the other votes. So Curt Schilling, I saw there was a question about Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling did okay on the public ballot rather, considering that he has offended every person he could possibly offend, all of those things. But he got about 70, pretty close to 70% on the public ballots. I think people appreciate, no matter what his personality is, whether they agree with his not just his politics, but the way he goes about things or not. He was a great pitcher and pitched very well in big games. 49.7% on the private ballots. So minus 20 points on the private ballot. And I can't quite figure it. I can't quite figure out what it is, because in a lot of ways, you would think if, I mean, you could imagine a certain kind of private ballot where those guys would go crazy for Curt Schilling, right? Because he was a big game pitcher. He always, was there in the big moments. And I don't know why 20-point drop in the private ballots, which is just huge, just a huge difference. Clemens and Bonds, every year they're way lower in the private ballots. 46% for Clemens, 45% for Bonds, 25-point drop for both of those guys compared to the public. And this is why, and again, I'm sure we'll talk more about this. This is why I don't think Clemens and Bonds are ever going to make it. I think that there is a silent, I don't know if it's a majority, silent minority, whatever the numbers are, but about 40 to 50% of this ballot that just sees things differently, pretty substantially differently. And I don't think those people are going to move. I don't think those people have moved. And I'm not saying, look, everybody here, I imagine, has read my stuff and knows how I feel about Bonds and Clemens, but I'm not even talking about whether it's right or wrong. I just don't think that anything that is being said, any argument that's being made, is having any impact at all on that private ballots. Here was the big one for me. Larry Walker, got a huge jump this year. And I think a lot of us thought that, like I said, he was going to get into the 60s and percentage-wise, and he was going to put himself in position to potentially go and get elected next year. He didn't. And the reason he didn't is because he only got 40% of the private ballot, 40%, which is basically what he got. That's basically where he was. It's a little bit of an improvement, but it's basically where he was last year or 2 years ago. I mean, it's way below 50%. So 25-point, it's the biggest difference between the public and the private. What in the world do these private ballot people have against him? I don't know. I mean, apparently a lot of Coors Field haters in the private ballots, but private ballots love themselves some Omar Vizquel. So Omar Vizquel got almost 50% of the private vote, plus 20 points on the private vote. The private vote loves Omar Vizquel. Old school, great defensive player, lots of hits. And I guess that really plays on the private ballot. And then Andy Pettitte actually really helped by the private ballot. Not a huge difference, but he got 14% on the private ballot, and that's what pushed him up and over the edge. I mean, he was probably gonna make it on anyway. You only have to be 5%, but that was a huge jump for him. So Pettitte makes it in. So anyway, I just think pretty interesting to look at the difference between the public and the private, but also to look at how people are viewing this and what's actually happening, what's moving. And really, when you look at this year, the four guys that get elected, all of those guys, all of them made, some kind of baseball history for the Hall of Fame. Mariano by getting elected unanimously, Edgar by making it the last time, Mussina with a gigantic leap forward over the last 2 years, really almost an unprecedented leap forward the last couple of years. And then Halladay, being first ballot and posthumous, and obviously going to be a very touching day. Other than that, a little bit of movement for Clemens, a little bit of movement for Vizquel, but generally speaking, we kind of just got the same that we had from last year. Other than those guys, it's pretty much the same from what we had from last year. So with that, if I can actually figure out how to do this, I'm going to look and see what kind of questions you have. So any questions, let's see here. Any questions that you have? Okay. Tori wants to say, was hoping for bigger numbers for Larry Walker. What do you think his chances are? Chances are 35%, I think, something like that. They're not great. I mean, you're asking for him to get a gigantic leap, and you're asking for him to get that gigantic leap in the private ballots where he did he didn't make any impact. When he's at 40%, he's going to have to get that thing up to, I don't even know what the math is, but generally, if you're figuring on, let's say he gets 85% of the private votes next year, which would be a big jump for him. But let's say he does get 85% of the public votes, rather, not the private. Let's say he gets that high. That's not going to be good enough. If he's getting 40% or something like that, it ain't going to happen. So kind of a little bit of a bummer. I think I really did kind of hope he was going to get there. Yes, Jerry, this is high comedy. I realized you wrote that a while ago, but I want to repeat it because it is definitely high comedy. Let's see here. Let's see. Anyone here in chat like hot fruit or cold fruit? I assume all of you like both hot fruit and cold fruit. Christopher wants to know, do you see Schilling getting in before his 10 years are up? Good question. I think yes. I think he will get in. I don't think it's going to be next year. He actually was another guy that could have made an even bigger leap forward, except for a very poor showing among the private ballots. I think he will. I think it'll be over. He has 3 more years too, right? He came on the same year as Bonds and Clemens. He's got a better chance than either of those guys. Quite a bit better chance than either one of those guys. I think he will. One thing that we can talk about, and I've written about it quite a bit on the blog, and I think you guys have talked about it a lot in the comments. There are no great starters coming on the ballot in forever, in the foreseeable future. I mean, for the next, 10 years, 5 to 10 years, there are some very good guys coming on the ballot, Tim Hudson and Mark Burley and a few other, that maybe you could make a sort of an Andy Pettitte-like argument. But there is no great starting pitcher coming on the ballot probably until Max Scherzer retires. I don't know how you guys feel about CC Sabathia, but he's a guy that's going to retire earlier than that. But we've got Scherzer, you got Kershaw, you got a tremendous collection of guys in that age bracket that could all come on the ballot pretty close to the same time. But over the next few years, it's pretty bleak. So I think Schilling is going to get in because at some point, you're going to want to put on a starter into the Hall of Fame. And as I have written, I think that a guy like Andy Pettitte, if he catches a little bit of momentum, a little bit of wind behind him, with nobody else on the ballot really stepping in his way, I think that's a guy that could surprise a little bit. I think that's a guy that could surprise. Let's see here. If Curt Schilling had been a closer, he would have been better or at least as good as Rivera. It's interesting. I've thought a lot about that exact thought, which is, I was pretty, for me, last year was a really telling bracket, Hall of Fame ballot. Trevor Hoffman gets elected to the Hall of Fame. Trevor Hoffman with 600 saves. I'm not, the great closer and all that. Johan Santana falls off the ballot. At no point in their, in Johan Santana's whatever prime, 8-year, 9-year prime, would you have traded Johan Santana for Trevor Hoffman. You wouldn't have even thought about it. It would not have even been an option to trade Johan Santana for Trevor Hoffman. Johan Santana was a better pitcher than Trevor Hoffman. And that's it's not meant to be a knock on Hoffman. Hoffman was a certain kind of pitcher and Santana was a starter, and that's just a much tougher job. And when you look at it that way, when you go, well, this is ridiculous, and even Mariano Rivera, as great as he was, only pitched 1,200 innings or so, and it was amazing, and he was incredible in the postseason, other than two bad outings. That's basically all he had in 140 plus innings. It was incredible, but a lot fewer innings than a lot of really great starters. So. And, Mariano wanted to be a starter. That was how he started his career. I don't like, people call him a failed starter. He wasn't really a failed starter. He was a guy who started, didn't pitch that well. They put him in the bullpen. He was so amazing. They never thought about putting him back on the rotation. But I do think about this a lot. And it's very, very hard to compare closers. And I don't know. Now, I think that again, better pitcher over the career. Curt Schilling's career is to me more amazing in the sense of the depth of his career and how many innings he pitched and all that than even a guy like Mariano Rivera. But that doesn't mean that if Curt Schilling had been Mariano Rivera that he would have been that great. He might have been terrible. Who knows? I mean, you don't have any idea. It is a different role. You got to pitch every day. You've got to come into different situations. You have to deal with failure and then come back right away the next day. I mean, there's a lot to it, and it's not it's oversimplified to say that, oh, and you could take any great starter or even good starter and they're going to be a great closer. I don't think that's true. And then the second element to that is there's never been a closer like Mariano. I mean, that's as a guy that has been very skeptical and believes there are too many relievers in the Hall of Fame, I think Mariano's on a whole different level because of his postseason performance, because of his dominance over however many years. He's on his own plane in my view. All right, Scott Rowland prime for a big push. Wait a minute, I don't know what I'm doing here. Let's see here. It's because it's moving so fast. You guys are sending so many questions in. All right. Let's see. Larry Walker needs to get the Tim Raines push. He does. Although Raines was a little bit ahead. I actually looked that up. Raines was a little bit ahead of where Walker is. So it's if Walker does get elected next year, that'll be, I think, unprecedented. I don't think anybody's ever made this kind of jump in the last year. So let's hope it happens. Let's see. For further discussion, you're starting the Hall of Fame from scratch. What non-players do you include? I hope all of you saw the New York Times story about Bill James. I hope you guys read that about how Bill James belongs to the Hall of Fame. It was very, very cool, written by a speechwriter. He's a guy, everybody starts. To me, the guy that is most, outside of who didn't play, didn't necessarily manage, wasn't on the field at all, or owners, because there's no owner that I would put in right now that, ahead of anybody else. The guy is Marvin Miller. I mean, everybody sort of believes Marvin Miller is the biggest absence in the Hall of Fame, but Marvin Miller is not a fun choice, right? I mean, he should be there. He absolutely should be there. He's one of the most important people in the history of baseball. But I would much prefer to talk about, I think, the guy who invented Topps baseball cards should be in the Hall of Fame. I think the guy who invented Stratomatic should be in the Hall of Fame. I think the San Diego Chicken should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Bill James should be in the Hall of Fame. I think there are a lot of people like that made the game more fun, made the game better. I was talking with somebody the other day, and we were talking about how, the person who who designed Camden Yards over at HOK, she should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, changed the entire game. The way that they built these, these old stadiums, that look new, or new stadiums that look old, or whatever you want to call them. They should be in the Hall of Fame. So I wish the Hall of Fame would open its doors a little bit. Now, those guys are in the Hall of Fame. They're in the museum. You can see them. There's actually even a San Diego Chicken full, whatever outfit in the whole place. They're in the Hall of Fame, but I would love to see the Hall of Fame stretch a little bit more and put in some, not writers like sports writers necessarily, but somebody who changes the way baseball is being viewed, like Bill James should. To me, it would be really fun to put him in the Hall of Fame. All right. Let's see. Will Walker and McGriff go in together in 2022? You guys have it? I don't know. I'll keep scrolling down. Do you guys know, when did McGriff retire? What was the year that McGriff retired? So I think he has to wait 15 years. Does he have to wait 15 years after he retired, or 15 years? I think it's 15 years after he retired. So actually he would be eligible next year. I think that's right. So because he was retired for 5 years, then he came on the ballot. So I think he's eligible immediately. In fact, we should be, because Lee Smith was eligible immediately. But I don't know. Whenever he's eligible, he goes in. Walker, I think it's going to be a little bit longer. I think Walker, interestingly enough, I think Walker is a guy that could have a little bit tougher time getting in by the Veterans Committee, but we can go over that later. Let's see here. Why did the board of directors overrule the BBWAA's decision to make 100% of the ballots public? How has the BBWA responded to that decision? I think the board of directors overruled them. I mean, so I'd be speaking for them. So I'm sort of guessing a little bit, but I think they overruled them because they didn't want, if people didn't want to make their ballot public, they didn't want to pressure them into making them public. They didn't want to feel like, I think there are some writers who feel like they get bullied, which, by the way, it's not true, and I don't care. I mean, so I'm not defending them, but I think some feel like, I want to just be able to make my choice. I don't want to get bullied. I don't want people to tell me I, made the wrong choice because I voted for Placido Polanco or whatever. And, we don't, as most of us and the writers don't feel that way. Most of us feel like this is a great honor to get to vote for the Hall of Fame. It's a responsibility and an honor. And if we believe in our votes, then we should be able to stand behind them. I think that is the vast majority view, which is why it passed, which is why the BBWAA asked to make that happen. But the Hall of Fame doesn't want to do that. The Hall of Fame at this point wants to give those people some cover if they want cover, they need cover. I always, I don't know if I'm a little bit skeptical or cynical or whatever, but I always think it has something to do with Bonds and Clemens. I always think every decision they have is like, we're going to make whatever decision is necessary to keep Bonds and Clemens out of the Hall of Fame. So that's my view. Let's see here. Let's go to the bottom here. All right. Jerry says, I think Goose Gossett should give Mariano's induction so he can tell us how he's actually better. That would be so awesome, by the way. And by the way, Goose would do it. Goose would have no problem whatsoever. Yes, Cy Berger is the guy who invented Topps cards. Thank you. There. Let's see. Roland poised to be the next Alan Trammell. That's good. I think that's right. The only problem I think with Roland is I'm not sure that Roland is gonna get the veterans vote after he's done. We'll see. We'll see. Look, the thing is, Roland has a lot of time left. He has another 8 years, and who knows what kind of analytics we'll have by then. Who knows how we'll be viewing the game by then. So a lot of things can still change, but I think it's pretty bizarre that Scott Rowland got, what did he get? 17% of the vote. And Omar Vizquel got 42% of the vote, 25% difference. I mean, I don't see it. Two great fielding players. One played short, one played third, right next to each other. And, shortstop slightly more important, but third baseman is very, very important defensively. Scott Rowland was all-time great as a defensive player. And Rowland was 5 times the hitter. I mean, so I don't understand why. Let's say you believe Omar Vizquel should go to the Hall of Fame because he was such a great defensive player. That's fine. Vote for Scott Rowland. Scott Rowland was an incredible defensive player. All right, let's see. Yes, Johnny makes a point that I actually made earlier. Yes, I guess it was. I think it was during this one, but I know I've written it a couple times. The difference between Halladay as a first ballot Hall of Famer and Santana, Johan Santana, who fell off the ballot, isn't that far off as I'm concerned. And Johnny, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And again, I was for both. I mean, I think Roy Halladay absolutely should be a Hall of Famer. Santana did not last as long. His career is definitely shorter. It definitely did not have as many great seasons as Halladay. So, I could see you drawing a line where you say, okay, you need to be minimum this good. But in their primes, when Halladay, Halladay had sort of a second prime with Philadelphia, but when Halladay was fantastic with the Blue Jays, Santana was better. He was the best pitcher in the American League when Halladay was at his absolute peak in a lot of ways, and Halladay was incredible. So, yes, and I will take full – I didn't vote for Johan Santana. I didn't have room for him on my 10-person ballot, and it was a short career, and there's things to knock, but I really do agree with you. I really wish Santana could have stayed on there. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Good question here. Your piece in The Athletic on the history of unanimity in Hall of Fame voting seemed to have resonated with a lot of people. How much credit do you want to take on Mariano going in unanimously? I am taking all the credit. I am taking literally 100%. No, I will say I don't take any credit for it, but I will say that there was something in there that I thought about that I started to hear other people say. And I was glad. I was really glad if this had any impact on even one voter. And that was, we needed to stop looking at Mariano as not being good enough to be the first unanimous player. And I think that's what people have been holding up on. They're like, oh, well, Ted Williams wasn't unanimous. How can you vote Hank Aaron unanimous? If Hank Aaron wasn't unanimous, how can you vote Johnny Bench unanimous? If Johnny Bench wasn't unanimous, how can you vote Cal Ripken unanimous? And it just kept going and going like that. Ken Griffey, how can you vote Ken Griffey? Ken Griffey wasn't as good as Willie Mays. Willie Mays wasn't unanimous. At some point, that had to stop because, one, people making mistakes, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, who cares? That should not impact you making a stupid vote now. That makes no sense. But the second thing that I thought about with this is the idea of trying to not vote somebody just to keep this ridiculous thing going. You look back in the history and you realize this ridiculous thing was going not because of some like mythical, oh, you don't want to, vote in anybody unanimous. It's just because of the way the voting was worked out for all those years. It was, nobody really understood the rules. Nobody knew what voting was. Frankly, Ty Cobb should have probably been unanimous. That was clear. And then Lou Gehrig kind of was unanimous, but it was like a special election, so it didn't count. Tom Seaver would have been, one vote short had people not voted blank ballots to protest the Pete Rose decision. So the whole thing was stupid, and people were defending a stupid history. And so if I expose that even a little bit, I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that. All right, let's see here. As a voting member, can the writers do anything to eliminate the rule of 10? You guys know the rule of 10 is we can only vote for 10 people on the ballot. And the answer is the writers asked already to that. The writers have asked to expand this thing from 10 to, I think, 12. I think was the way that what they asked to expand. And the Hall of Fame said no. The Hall of Fame is, again, remember my rule. Think about every rule the Hall of Fame makes and how it would affect Bonds and Clemens. So that's the first step. But the second step is the Hall of Fame is very, very touchy about any idea that they're loosening their standards. Like that's a big no-no for them. Their basic theme on everything is only the top 1% of all players in the history of the game go to the Hall of Fame, and they never want that to be touched. And they feel like expanding the ballot would be, whether or not it actually would change a whole lot, I don't know, but they don't want to even give the appearance that they're watering down their standards. So that's not going to change. It's not going to change for a while. Nikolai makes the point, and it's a very good point. Is every argument now Harold Baines got in? Why not blank? I hope not. I hope that's not every argument, because if that is every argument, there are 75 players that should go into the Hall of Fame tomorrow. And again, Harold Baines was a fine player, and there are things that Harold Baines did. He got a lot of hits. He played for a long time, respected, had some postseason moments. He did a lot of really good things, but nobody thought Harold Baines was a Hall of Famer, and suddenly he's in the Hall of Fame. So how do you deal with that? And the answer is we don't have anything to do with it, because the BBWAA didn't vote him in. He was voted in by a group of 12. I think at least 12 people in a 16-person committee voted him in, and that's just not going to have any impact, I don't think, on anybody else ever. So somebody else pointed in something about Jeter. Derek Jeter is on the ballot next year. Here's a scenario I had not thought about before, but one I'm curious what you guys think about. What if Jeter doesn't go in unanimously? Now that Mariano Rivera has changed the entire the entire plateau of what you're supposed to be able to achieve. Now, what if Derek Jeter doesn't go in unanimously? And I think even most people would say Derek Jeter was an even bigger star, an even bigger impact than Mariano Rivera. And so now what? A Yankee, and I do not want to be the person who doesn't vote for Derek Jeter. Let's just say that. And I'm sure that will be a private person if that actually happens. All right, let's see. We'll give you, let's take like 2 or 3 more here. Let's see. My sense it's the older writers who tend to keep their ballots private. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. I think older writers and certainly with older sort of views of the game tend to be the ones that don't reveal their ballot, which is weird because I mean a lot of the great old writers are very much reveal their ballot. I mean they've been revealing their ballot for 50 years. They've been writing columns about it, and they've never hidden behind their ballot. I don't know. I just. It bugs me. It really bugs me to have somebody. It bugs me to hide behind the ballot. It bugs me when people do that. I just don't think. I don't think it's right. And hopefully, if there's one thing about the Mariano, I mean, I think the Mariano news is great in general. But also, if it keeps people from hiding their ballot because they wanted to be the one or one of the few that doesn't vote for the person to kind of keep this thing from going unanimous, we end that nonsense right now. Here's a good one from Wes. With the 50th anniversary of Miracle Mets coming up, do you see another push for Gil Hodges to make the Hall of Fame? So the way that the Veterans Committee works now is that they take up players from different eras at different times. So I don't know when the Gil Hodges era comes up again. It might be 2022. I think 2020 and 2021 are more recent players. And I think maybe 2022, but I mean, I'm doing that off the top of my head. So yes, I think in 2022, there's a pretty good chance, but I fear he's going to be behind quite a few other players. I think the next sort of, I wouldn't call him old timer, but the next sort of pre-expansion era player to go into the Hall of Fame, or 60s or 70s type player to go in the Hall of Fame, I think it's going to be Dick Allen. He fell 1 vote short last time. I think he'll get in. I think Tony Oliva has a chance as well. So I think there might be another push for a guy like a Jim Cott with all those wins. So I don't know where Gil Hodges is on that mix, but he's again, how can you argue? Okay, good. Somebody pointed out Hodges in 2021. So that's in a couple of years. And, again, we could just do this. I mean, if Harold Baines is in the Hall of Fame, and, it's awfully hard to say Gil Hodges. Awfully hard to say Gil Hodges wasn't good enough to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if you guys lost me there for a minute. There was some, again, technical difficulties, as always. So let's see. So what did I say? 2 more, right? Let's see here. Schilling may go to 2021. That's good. Here we go. Will we see another shutout in 2021? It's possible. I think that with next year is obviously big with Jeter. Then it's a very sort of shaky ballot, but I think Schilling is going to be on the ballot in 2021. So he's a guy that could definitely go in. That's going to be the interesting year to watch, because that'll be Schilling's second last year on the ballot, right? 2020's 8. Yeah. But it'll also be Bonds and Clemens' second last year on the ballot. And there's not really anybody pushing them that are going to take a lot of votes. I think people are, one of the interesting elements of the way the ballot's been going lately is that more and more people are voting for 10 players. And I think people are getting used to voting for 10 players. And, as the ballot thins out and suddenly you're not looking at 10 definite Hall of Famers, which, we could get there fairly quickly. Will people keep voting for 10? Will people keep voting like, okay, well, I always vote for 10. Now I'm going to vote for Andy Pettitte. And I always vote for 10. And now I'm going to vote for Jeff Kent. I mean, are these guys going to get the benefit of the 10-person ballot? Something to keep an eye on. All right. Last question. Let's see. How many can we realistically look to get elected next year? It's a great question. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to look up next year's ballot one more time so I have it right in front of me. And that way I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. So you don't even need to pay attention next year because I'll be able to tell you. All right. So the top return, well, let's see. Okay. The top first timers on the ballot will be Derek Jeter is going on the ballot, and he will get voted in for sure. Probably, let's just call it. He's going to get voted in unanimously. What do you think? I think he'll get voted in unanimously. Bobby Abreu is going to probably get enough to stay on the ballot, maybe, but it's going to be close. He's going to be pretty close to toward the bottom, but he's got a pretty interesting sabermetric case. A few votes for Jason Giambi, but probably not that many. A few votes for Cliff Lee. Cliff Lee, who would you rather have? If you guys want to just give me a very quick right in the thing, who would you rather have pitching? Cliff Lee or Andy Pettitte? Who would you rather have pitch in the one game in a seventh game of World Series? They're both in their prime. Which would you rather have? Cliff Lee, and I'll total up the results here in just a minute. So let's see. Any other first ballot guys? For Cal, Eric Chavez. I saw somebody earlier today ask, like, wow, Jason Bay is retired, which I swear there are guys like that. And like, I look at Rafael Furcal and I'm like, wait, he's retired? Is that true? Chavez, I guess we knew that. Josh Beckett. We're really getting to the point where guys who just seemed to be there a couple of days ago, are suddenly appearing on the ballot. One of the interesting ones on the ballot next year, I'm very, very curious to see how he's going to get treated, is Alfonso Soriano. So Alfonso Soriano has he's a 28.2 WAR, which puts him, completely out of the picture as a Hall of Famer. I mean, he's, his jaws is basically half of what it needs to be. But 412 home runs, 289 stolen bases, like an incredible power speed guy. I'm not saying he's going to get on the ballot or whatever. I'm not saying he's going to be able to stay on the ballot, but it's kind of interesting. Just kind of interesting. All right. So those are the first timers. So Jeter's in and nobody else is really going to be a big impact. The question is whether Schilling or Walker can make that kind of jump. I don't think Bonds or Clemens, maybe Bonds and Clemens make a leap forward, but they're certainly not going to get elected. So Schilling, I think it's a little bit too big of a jump for Schilling. I think he puts himself in position to get elected, but I don't think he quite gets elected next year. And then Walker is the one to watch. I mean, it's his last year on the ballot. He did, there were a lot of people who sort of came home on him finally and just realized what a great all-around player he was. But boy, that's a big, big jump. We might have one. We really might. It might be Derek Jeter all alone next year. And that would set up probably a pretty, interesting 2022, or 2021. And let's see who comes on the ballot that year. Let's just throw this in here as I look at my computer screen. So in 2021, the first timers, Tim Hudson comes on the ballot, Burley. Those guys are interesting, but probably not going to be a huge impact the first, at all. Torrey Hunter comes on the ballot. He's probably not going to make much of an impact. So yeah, 2020 and 2021 are going to be very interesting. And that's when we're really going to find out if Bonds and Clemens have any legs at all. All right, let me look here and count up what we got here. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for Lee, and 1 for Pettitte. So 90% of you, based on the small sample size, 90% of you think Cliff Lee was a better pitcher, and I'm with you. I mean, again, Andy Pettitte was terrific, and he did a lot of great things, and it was a balk. But Cliff Lee in his prime was sensational. I hope that's something that does change. I hope we start looking at these players, pitchers particularly, for their greatness and not for whatever we used to look at pitchers for. The game has just changed, and being great for a few years as a starter in today's game is much, much different than hanging around and winning 300 games and all the other stuff. It's greatness in a new era. So hopefully we'll look at it that way. So thanks so much for doing this. And I really thank you for sticking with me through this absurd technical issues that I went through. I can't thank you enough for joining. And we'll do this again. We'll do this again really soon. And I'm going to try to do this more often if you're with me. So thanks again, and have a great night.